Welcome everyone. We have a focus today on electrical and computer engineering and collaborating effectively. Thanks for joining us. My name is Amy Beebe. I use the pronouns she, hers. I'm the Assistant Director for Women in STEM, which is housed within the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement here at the University of Texas at Austin. So excited to have you here. We have a fabulous lineup of panelists throughout the rest of July. So we hope that you can join us for our weekly panel discussions with current students, alums, and STEM role models from our community. Talking about role models, I want to touch on this really amazing site, FabFems.org. It is a directory of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics professions who are inspiring role models for young women and girls and anyone really interested in the STEM fields. It is managed by the National Girls Collaborative Project, and it's really an opportunity for students to go on there and look up role models across a variety of fields. So you can do a search based on what field of interest you're interested in the area that you are in, based on their background or the job that they are in. There are so many different ways to do a search on here to find somebody that you may be able to connect with. You're able to see who they are, what they're doing, how they got there, and even some of them are open to connecting with you and meeting with you. So then you can get the opportunity to ask them all of these questions about what is it like to really be in this role or in this position. So definitely get on there and take a look. We will also be adding all of our FabFems Friday webinars to our WiSTEM YouTube channel, and also a lot of other helpful videos in the future for current students, future students, prospective students, whomever, just so you can start learning a little bit more about STEM. So subscribe to our channel and you'll get notified when new videos are added. And please also subscribe so we can continue to increase the number of subscribers on our channel. So all of these sites that we're talking about, Sachi, our incredible program assistant, is throwing them in the chat. So with that, we will start our introductions. I encourage you to submit any questions that you may have using the Q&A function of Zoom. I would also say you can submit them with your name attached. You can submit them anonymously, but don't hesitate to start sticking questions in there as our panelists are talking. So today our focus is on collaborating effectively and a spotlight on electrical and computer engineering. So we will have each panelist share some quick introductions to help get us started. So panelists, if you can start off with your name, your pronouns, if you'd like to share them, hometown, your major, your degree, what company or organization that you are with, and also what you like to do outside of school or work. So with that, we will kick it off with Cassandra.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Cassandra. I go by she, her pronouns. I grew up in Rockport, Texas, which is a small town on the coast near Corpus Christi. I studied electrical and computer engineering at UT. I got a bachelor's there and graduated in 2020, May 2020. I am now at Stanford pursuing my PhD in electrical engineering. And outside of school, I like to rock climb and surf and go hiking and just anything outdoors.
Awesome. I guess I'll go next. My name is Allison Korchinski. I use she, her pronouns. My hometown is Houston, Texas, part of Katy, Texas. And I went to UT Austin for undergrad, majored in electrical engineering. That's been 12 years ago when I graduated. I spent about 10 years in industry, and I pursued a master's degree at Stanford. And now I work at Meta, in particularly Reality Labs, which used to be formerly Oculus Research. One thing I like to do outside of work is play Ultimate Frisbee. Yeah, so that's me.
That is really cool. Annette?
Hi, my name is Annette Sluter. I graduated from UT in 2009 with a degree in chemical engineering. I'm also from Katy, small world. But I currently live in North Dakota and I work for Marathon Petroleum. I'm a pipeline operations engineer. My free time, so I have two small children. They are 4 and 2, and I just like to spend as much time with them on the weekends, especially right now outside. We go camping, we go hiking, we go swimming at the lake. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. It sounds like really active, extra hobbies to do outside of work. Okay, so let's focus in and talk a little bit more about electrical and computer engineering. Can each of you share a bit more about your pathway into electrical and computer engineering? How did you choose this area? What led you here? And the work that you do, Cassandra, or let's do it reverse. Let's start with Annette.
Well, I actually did chemical engineering, but I think what drew me to this session was the collaborate effectively, because that's a huge part of my everyday is working with people from all kinds of disciplines and backgrounds. So like I said, I did chemical, went straight to the oil field with Schlumberger and did a few years of hydraulic fracturing before I jumped over to the pipeline side. And I guess just to kind of hit on what I do with our electrical and computer engineers at Marathon is, honestly, our computer engineers, our controls engineers make this whole pipeline system run safely and efficiently every day. And as chemical engineer, I'm obviously making sure we can get oil from A to B with the hydraulic power that we have. And then they're doing the computer programming in the background to make it all jive. And so as far as other engineers, I spend a lot of time with them. And I know just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to speak the language.
I definitely know that feeling. Allison?
Yeah, so before UT, I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. I knew I liked math, and I also really liked crafts and sewing. So I just love to be hands-on. How I ended up in electrical and computer engineering is because my least favorite subject was chemistry, but I loved math, and I realized that, hey, this was a good option for me. And honestly, the more that I started doing classes, I realized how hands-on I got to be as an electrical engineer. I do hardware engineering, I do prototyping. It starts from building crafts like this, to circuit boards like this, to building laptops that we use every single day. So where it started was I took a class in microcontrollers where we literally designed a traffic light, something that we see every single day. I thought it was so cool to understand how that works. And that led me to pursue hardware engineering as an electrical engineer. So that's it.
Awesome.
All right, yeah, kind of similar to Allison. When I joined or was choosing a major, I didn't really know what to do. And I was also like, I like math and I like being creative. So I was like, I guess I'll do engineering. But I actually joined UT as a civil engineering major. And I was in civil engineering for a year, and I happened to be put in as a part of one of the what was it? Gosh, but the thing where you like meet people your first year. And so I was like randomly put in this class with a bunch of other engineering people, and it was a logic, light turned off in here. It was a logic class, and I had never, like, my high school didn't offer computer science or anything like that. So I had never seen what like computer logic class could be. And it like blew my mind. And I was like, this is really cool. And so I decided to transfer into electrical engineering after my first quarter or semester at UT. And yeah, I ended up really liking it. I was always interested in chemistry. I liked chemistry growing up. And so that's kind of why I decided to go more material science direction, which is where I am now, but it's like more of the electronics properties of like materials and everything. So that's kind of the path I came to electrical engineering.
I appreciate y'all sharing how you were like, I'm not really sure about this, don't really know a lot about it, but then just kind of found it and found a passion for it as you started learning and exploring about it. So sometimes we don't always go into doing things immediately knowing that that's what we want to do, right? Sometimes it takes a little bit of that exploration to get there. So currently, Cassandra and Allison, Cassandra, how in your PhD program, what does that look like? Can you share a project or an experience that gives us some insight into the field of study at a graduate level? And then Allison, for you at like out in industry and the work.
Yeah, so I'm going into my third year of my PhD, and I guess like going into my PhD, I always knew, like everyone was like, okay, it's very like self-paced, and I was like, oh, I'm good at like scheduling, it'll be fine. And now that I'm here, I was like, okay, it's like super self-paced. So like I'll have a day where I literally have nothing on my schedule, and I have to like make a schedule for myself. So that's something that has been like an interesting challenge. So I've actually learned to like appreciate having classes that like block out my day, or having meetings to kind of block out my day, because it helps me like set the schedule for the other projects I'm working on. And then types of projects that I can kind of give an example of. So pretty much everything in my PhD, while a lot of it is like self-driven, a lot of it is like problem solving and like figuring things out with the other people who work in my lab, or coming up with something myself and then like checking with them, like, does this make sense? Do you think this would be a good way to move forward? So I'm kind of working on two projects right now. One of them is very hands-on, where we're actually like setting up an optical setup in our lab and aligning things and taking measurements. And another one of my projects is more materials based, where it's based a lot in like fabricating samples. And so that definitely has a lot of like collaborating with other people and asking them like, oh, I don't know how to do this, but your lab does this a lot. Can I learn from you to see like how we can build the structure in our lab also? So while a PhD is like kind of very self-led, you have to work a lot with other people throughout the whole process. I hope that answered that question.
I'll go next. So my role is very collaborative, and it's changed. I've worked in mass production consumer electronics, things like building watches or phones or computers, and now I work in the field of augmented and virtual reality research. So in particular, I get to research and make prototypes related to interaction research. For example, has anyone tried virtual reality before? If they haven't, it's really cool. Right now, virtual reality is very visual. in audio based. And so our brains get confused and kind of, we perceive that we're there, which is awesome. The research that I work in and we build prototypes for is related to touch. So it's really fun. Every single day is different. Things related to touch could be literally playing chess with somebody, giving them a high five. It's a really new field. It's really fun. And every day is different. Some days I'm going into the office building a manufacturing line. Sometimes I'm traveling to China to go to the manufacturing line. Sometimes I'm soldering. Sometimes I'm doing schematics and board layouts. It involves a huge collaboration working with mechanical engineers, chemical engineers and material scientists, psychology majors, and professionals, and other electrical engineers, software engineers. It is awesome to work with so many talented individuals. And I had no idea that I would end up in Seattle, Washington, and being from Texas. I thought I'd never leave Texas. And it's just really cool to see kind of where your career can take you. Every day is different, and I have a lot of fun building things. So,
I mean, that sounds pretty cutting edge on a lot of things that you are working on, which is really, really exciting. And it shows a little bit about how the work that electrical and computer engineers can have an impact in just, interesting ways in your daily life, which is awesome. So shifting a little bit of focus, and Cassandra and Allison have talked a little bit about this, but Annette, can you share what does collaborating effectively mean to you? And where does this as a professional skill come into play in the work that you do?
So for me, honestly, it comes down to communication. And making sure everybody feels comfortable voicing their opinion, whether they are a field operator, a degreed engineer, or somebody working in our like pipeline specific or control center, elsewhere, but just valuing everybody's opinion and taking into consideration what everybody has to say. Some engineers have a tendency to think, well, my book says this, I learned this in school, and this is the way it is. And especially when you get out, if you go into more of a field-based role, I've only done oil field, but you've got operators that didn't do any school beyond high school, but they've been doing their roles for 30, 40 years, and they know a lot. And so the worst thing you can do, especially as a young engineer out of school, is just walk out there and say, I know how this is because my book said this. And so, yeah, going back to collaborating effectively, I've always made sure to ask the guys that work on the equipment every day, and some women, mostly guys, their opinions. And a lot of people in corporate America like to complain about meetings, but collaborating effectively requires meetings. There's no way around it.
Otherwise, how can you collaborate if you're not meeting together in some form or fashion, right?
Yeah.
So how do you feel that you were able to gain this skill or get better at it?
So I think a big part of it is having humility day one on the job, accepting the fact that there are people out there with a lot more knowledge than you, regardless of whether they have a piece of paper on their wall in a frame or they're just coming from the field. And so when I was working at Schlumberger, I was there for almost 3 years in the field, day in and day out, very rough working conditions. And just, that was just a humbling experience in itself. So I think I like to tell young engineers, especially in school, like if you have the opportunity and you're interested in a specific industry and there is an opportunity to kind of start on the ground floor versus starting in an office in a big city, take the ground floor job because you're going to learn a lot more, whether it be at a plant or refinery, out in the field, whatever that might be. I just really encourage people to get out in the field day one And that's the way they're going to learn the most.
Yes. And so for Allison, as someone being out in industry as well, can you talk about who is it that you are collaborating in the work that you're doing as well, and how have you learned to try to collaborate effectively?
Yeah. So it's changed. It's been really interesting to see how my collaborations have changed, let's say from school, where you have assigned lab partners, and then even in grad school, more lab partners, and then you start to go into industry where your lab partners and project partners didn't come from the same background and aren't taking the same classes. So it gets really interesting in that when you're working with a bunch of other talented, smart folks who come from different fields, come from different backgrounds, one of the best collaboration strategies I've taken is understanding what they like, coming up with a common language. Sometimes we say, let's synchronize, or let's do this acronym, this 3-letter acronym. And you're like, I don't know what that means. And that's totally okay. And it's totally awesome. I feel like I spend half the time, honestly, just trying to understand a common language and a common understanding of what problem we're trying to solve, because we're all smart in our field. We all have different jargon and different terms for electrical engineering and even different types of electrical engineering. And it all varies from industry to industry. I've been in consumer electronics most of my career, but I work with people from the aerospace industry. I work with people from academia. I work with people from medicine. And it's really cool to see that sometimes we're talking about very similar things, just using a different word. So that was comforting to me, to know that even though we all do different things, we can still find commonality. And, you know, I do think it requires being patient. Sometimes, like, it's okay to ask questions. Sometimes people don't know what I'm talking about, and that's okay. They ask me questions and I say, yeah, I know that, or no, I don't know what that is. Let's figure it out together. You know, every single person has a unique backstory and has incredible things and talents and skills to share. And to me, you know, regardless of what their field is, I think it's really cool to talk with them and find out, wow, even though, you know, someone's building something at a macro scale and I'm building something at a micro scale, it's actually kind of the same thing in a way. Like, I literally was looking up fluid dynamics yesterday for something in electrical engineering, which it's like, well, why would that be related to consumer electronics? It can be. And so I just think that the fact that you have to narrow, you know, the fact that you pick a major, that's one thing, but it's really cool because regardless in your career, you can collaborate with so many different unique individuals and different fields and explore that yourself. If you're like, I don't like hardware or I don't like programming, I get to do a little bit of everything. So
yeah, you get to learn a little bit more than that one specialty that you kind of spent a lot of time learning.
Exactly.
It keeps things interesting, hopefully, for you all.
Always. Yeah.
Okay, so we have had a couple of questions come into the Q&A here, and please feel free, audience, to throw more questions in of all types, of all sorts. One, Allison had responded back to this person about internships that help you get to where you are now. So Allison responded back a little bit about some of the things that she was able to do. Annette, Cassandra, do y'all want to share maybe some of the opportunities that y'all took advantage of to help navigate you to the spot? And we'll start with Annette.
So I did a co-op. I'd highly recommend doing a co-op. It's totally worth, I guess, getting behind a semester if you think about it that way, but I enjoyed my bonus fall semester. I did a co-op with Emerson Process Management, and that was more process controls related, which is actually diving into, controls and computer engineering a bit. And honestly, it taught me that I didn't want to be a controls engineer. But it, gave me some experience. And when I jumped over to the pipeline side, was able to kind of go back to some things I learned there and use it when I am working with controls engineers. So that was the only co-op I did in college. I did have a brief internship, actually my senior year of high school with BP. And so that's kind of always, I knew I was always going in an oil and gas direction. But yeah, I'd highly recommend the co-op program. Totally worth it.
So Nat, for those that may not know what the co-op program, will you share a little bit about what co-op is?
So to me, it's the same 13 years later, but
it probably is.
Yeah. So you end up, working with a company. Most of them will have internships or co-ops posted, but if you do the co-op program, I believe you register for a class at UT also. And so you do it for a semester where you just work a summer and a semester. So that's why I said you do get behind a semester potentially, but as far as I know, they're all paid. At least mine was paid very well. So I'll be honest, I was looking for one in Austin because I wanted to stay in Austin and hang out with my friends still. So it was kind of fun. I got to have the college experience of hanging out with my friends and get paid a lot of money for a semester. And yeah, I made a lot of connections. I'm still connected with a lot of those people on LinkedIn. They check in on me every once in a while. Yeah, that's the co-op program as I remember it. It's been a minute.
No, that's exactly right. You work full time for a semester and you get paid full-time employment for that time, and it can put you back a semester. But like you said, there's a lot of benefits that can come with that program.
I guess I should say if you can afford it too.
Yeah.
I was lucky that wasn't an issue to have to take an extra semester. But yeah, sure. All things considered, totally worth it. Employers love seeing that experience on your resume because it's more than just one summer. Summer and a semester, it's substantially more. You could have been involved in a longer term project rather than just the odds and ends that you can do in a summer.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I also did some internships in undergrad. I did 2 internships. My first one was summer of my sophomore year. And I worked at a defense contractor called Northrop Grumman. And they actually had their own fab, which was like unusual for a company to have their own fab. So that was actually pretty cool because it was still like a small fab, so not as big as like Intel or Samsung, but I got to kind of learn the process of like how computer chips are made and fabricated, and that was neat. But I also learned that a lot of the people doing the cutting edge work had PhDs. So I was like, that kind of like got me thinking about going to graduate school. And then my second internship was at Intel, and it was in a completely different area. It was like their data storage center. And that internship I didn't like. I didn't like the projects that they gave me, but I had one of the best summers of my life. They had a really strong internship program there, and I made some of like my best friends that I'm still friends with now. So that was a really great experience, despite not liking the day-to-day work. And then also all throughout my undergrad, I did research with a professor, which was also a good experience and kind of guided me toward wanting to go to grad school. And so I think that both my internships and the research experience were affirmed that I wanted to continue on my education.
That's awesome. We also like to say that it's just as important to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what it is that you do want to do. And by taking on some of those experiences and exploring some of those, you can definitely say, yep, crossing this off of the list, definitely not going to go in this direction. It can be helpful. For sure. So we did have a really good question about the difference between computational and software engineering. This is a question that we get a lot, often by students who are trying to figure out, what direction do I want to go? What should I focus in on if this is what my end goal is? So be sure to check out the answered questions. Allison gives a really great explanation of some of the differences between that computer and software engineering. The other question, and we can come back to it, but I really love this question about collaborating with so many people. You are bound to come into conflicts. So what kind of conflict resolution strategies do you have and can share with us on how to handle that, either quickly, if possible, right? Because sometimes we know quickly and effectively may not actually be in the same sentence, or effectively, even if it's a longer term. So if each of y'all kind of want to touch on that, if you feel like you have a really good example.
I'll quickly give, I guess, some advice, an example. So we all have different communication styles. So to me, I kind of think of it as having different lab partners within college. Sometimes they're very similar experiences, sometimes they're not. Sometimes we get to choose our lab partners, sometimes we don't. So I think when I faced a disagreement or a misunderstanding, I actually like to use a method and a framework that I've actually used in couples counseling. I do believe that active listening is a good way to quickly resolve conflicts. You say, I observed this, it made me feel this next time, or I would love to see this instead. I think sometimes it's because everyone has different communication styles. I think it's really important to bring up things, be direct, but make sure they understand it. Like, I think it's really important to do active listening. So to confirm that whoever you're having a conflict with understands kind of what your perspective is and what their perspective is, because you're not able to come to an agreement if you can't even get on the same page. So active listening and having a framework, I think, are my strategies.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement there. Like I said earlier, it comes down to communication skills. And a big part of communicating is listening. And I'm going to throw humility out there again, because I think it's huge. I've just seen a lot of issues at work come when somebody's ego is too big. Especially being in the oil field, being in a male-dominated industry, you're going to get a lot of ego issues. And yeah, it's just, I've witnessed so many conflicts that I'm just like, if y'all would just take a breath and say, hey, I'm hearing this and I'm hearing that. Oh, that's not what I meant. You'd have 90% of your issues solved.
Sometimes it's asking those probing questions of, let me understand that I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly.
Yep.
Yeah, my experience has been same with Annette and Allison. Like, definitely just like sometimes egos can get in the way in academia as well, and making sure that you have very clear communication. Especially, I feel like in grad school you meet so many people from all over the world, where like there could be cultural differences and like how you communicate things. So I think just being as straightforward and communicative as possible when there might be some sort of issue is the best way to handle it. And sometimes like taking a step back from things, like if something is getting heated, just being like, we need to take some time, like step away from this and then we can come talk about it later once everyone has reached a calmer state.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that cultural difference real quick. Coming from a big university like UT, you are bound to land a good job that's going to have some kind of international influence, or go to grad school and definitely collaborate, I guess, more internationally. And when I worked for Schlumberger, they sent me to Russia for 8 weeks for a training. I was the only American in my class. And even though we were all engineers, we were all doing a similar job role, just in different areas of the world. I had a huge issue with some of the guys in my class, particularly just because of the way they were, just brought up differently in the way they treat women. And I just always had to remind myself, like, they don't necessarily know any differently right now. And this isn't personal. And so I think that's another big piece of advice I have, is sometimes to just understand that people are coming from a different background, and you are going to run in, especially as women in engineering, you will be offended at some point in time. It's going to happen, unfortunately. But you 100% should say, this is why that's offensive. But also just realize they might not know any better. It's just the way it is other places. Not everywhere is a big, international city like Boston. So yeah, another 2 cents that I had.
Yeah, I really agree that, like, sometimes when I've had conflict, I usually am one of the only females on my team, which makes it difficult. But one thing to get over that difficulty, to work through conflict, is to actually have an ally or two. My best ally is my manager. My manager can be, they don't always know what to do, but telling them, hey, what you're going through, and hey, like, I noticed this person's interrupting me. Can you help me? Can you help me in this situation whenever you see it? It doesn't always have to be your manager either. I have tons of mentors who are both male and female, or whatever gender, and they help. They stand up for me, and they serve as a just guidance, listening to me, as well as an ally. And I really do think that, you can't go through conflict alone sometimes. Sometimes you need help, and it is totally okay to ask for help. I also have a wonderful therapist who helped coach me through a really difficult conflict in industry. So just know that you can always have help and resources around you.
Yes, thanks, Allison, for bringing that up. And so far we have seen this, and the theme of our panelists is it's okay to ask for help. That has been something that has come up over and over again, because, sometimes we can't handle this alone. These are not skills, whether it is for our workforce, whether it's our people skills, whatever the case may be. It's not necessarily something that we're just born with. That's something that we have to learn, that we have to develop, that we have to practice, that we have to fail at. Right? Failure is a big part of it, to learn how can we go about doing this a bit better, or how can we do it better the next time, and maybe giving ourselves a little bit of charity and grace to say, like, we're not going to do it perfect every single time, and that is okay. We can keep trying, and keep trying is that we do it differently is what's important the next time, right? So we are getting close to time here. And what I'd like to do, we seem to have answered the questions that have popped up in the Q&A. So to round out, y'all have given out so much good advice, so much helpful information, but is there one more piece of something? Maybe I didn't ask a question, or you hold on to this and you're like, this is the one thing that I always want to make sure that I share out anytime that I have the opportunity to. What would that be? I'm putting them on the spot here with an impromptu question, so I can give you a moment if you don't have something handy. But yeah.
Annette, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I guess I always like to say network. It was really cool to start doing these women in engineering or women in STEM virtual panels. It's one good thing that came out of the last couple of years as far as relying on Zoom. But now that I think everybody's kind of moving back towards campus and those kind of things, like get involved in, well, I know it's AICHE for the chemical engineers, but whatever electrical engineering or computer engineering society, or whatever women in engineering offers, whatever society of women engineers, just try to join at least one of those groups. I did not. I went to a couple my freshman year and then just kind of trailed off and did my own thing. And that's the one thing I would have done differently, is just networked a bit more.
Okay. I have two. I'll try to be quick. One of them is, in my opinion, and in my role, we always have to advocate for ourselves. I think it is really important to not just wait for opportunity, not wait to be asked, not wait to be invited. Sometimes in this industry and in the world, regardless of what path you choose, you are your best advocate. And, you know yourself the best, you're a badass, you're awesome. And just don't forget that, because sometimes when a lot of things are not going the way you think, you're like, oh gosh, what have I done? But it's those things happen and it's okay. But you've gotten through a lot of things before, you're going to get through them again. And so advocating for yourself, I think is huge. And then also, maybe more controversial, better to ask forgiveness than permission. I really do believe that, unless it's dealing with safety. Safety is important, but go for the gusto, be bold. So.
Yeah, I think those are all really great pieces of advice. I think for me, at least one of the things that I really tried to do in undergrad was just try as many experiences as possible and different things. I didn't know what I want. I still don't know what I want to do. And I think just trying out different experiences was a really helpful way for me to figure that out, and talking to people. So that can go hand in hand with networking. It's just being like, oh, you work at this company, how do you like that? What is the environment like? What's the culture like there? And it kind of helps just give you an idea of what might lie ahead for you. And so trying out internships, trying out different research groups, because you might get lucky your first time and find a really good mentor in a research group, but you could also get really unlucky and have a very bad mentor and have a bad experience. But that doesn't mean that you will always have a bad experience in whatever situation it is. So I would just say try as many things as possible, and keep an open mind.
Incredible advice, as always, that we get from our panelists. I'm with you, Annette, and loved doing these. And it is so great to be able to hear so many different perspectives, hear the advice that you all share that come from a place of experience, and helping the next generation of engineers to continue to, build better. So with that, we are at time. A huge thank you to you all for joining us and in this discussion. We hope that you found it very beneficial and you were able to take some key things away from it. And we will be posting this on our YouTube channel. So if you ever want to go back and watch a little bit, some sections, you'll be able to do that. A huge thank you and round of applause to our incredible panelists here. We just want to give many, many thanks to y'all for coming in and joining us with this. And so hopefully, audience, we'll see y'all next week. And for our panelists, we hope you also had a great time joining us today. And we look forward to touching base later. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Yes.